Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of What's on My Desk. Today I brought a couple of very special pieces and a piece you guys have always been asking me about, my opinion on the watch, and I happened to buy a few of them and therefore I brought it to show it to you physically. So what did I bring? I brought a very limited and rare Audemars Piguet Perpetual calendar in rose gold, limited edition of 25 pieces. I brought the Patek 5270R, but not just any 5270R Perpetual calendar chrono, the one on the rose gold bracelet, which they made very, very few. And the watch you guys often ask me about is GP Laureato Skeleton. And I happen to have bought this watch in every variation, which is the steel, the PVD, and the rose gold. And I brought the PVD one to show you. I'm gonna kick things off with the GP Laureato. By the time you unwrap one of these things, it makes you wanna slit your wrist. So I unwrapped the watch, I left the bracelet intact. Titanium case, extremely light watch, 42 millimeters, and a complete skeleton. One of the things right off the bat I'll tell you, what everybody makes fun of, oh, this is their version of the Royal Oak. Absolutely not. This is not their version of the Royal Oak. The Laureato collection has been around since 1975. And it was in 2017 when they actually decided to expand their collection into other variations, starting with this beautifully executed skeleton, showing you the inner workings of the entire movement. The movement is hand finished on a steel and the rose gold version. It is also hand finished on the PVD version. You just can't really tell because it's PVD'd. Skeleton front, skeleton back. If you can see that across the stickers. Nice touch with the gold rotor. Sort of stands out between all the blackness of the PVD finish on the watch. Deploying buckle, your typical Laureato bracelet, extremely light, extremely comfortable to wear, and an extremely good looking watch. I'm gonna put it on the wrist so you guys can get an idea of what that looks like. It's certainly a looker off the wrist, and it's definitely a looker on the wrist. One of the things to notice is the very thick baton hands. And the reason that I did this for legibility, oftentimes you get a skeleton watch that's not very legible to read time on, and they thought ahead. It may have taken away somewhat from the aesthetic of the skeleton, but nevertheless, it makes it easier to read. I have a lot of clients that will complain and say, oh, you know, this is a gorgeous watch, but I can't read the time. And what good is a watch if I can't read the time on it? Although most of us probably look at our iPhone nowadays, right? In 2017, GP has celebrated the 225th anniversary. This is a company that's been around for a long, long time. This is a company that stays, and oftentimes you see their stuff discounted. I discussed this before, you know, some companies choose to produce quantities, and when you produce large quantities, they tend to discount more. These particular timepieces will not discount more. You'd be hard-pressed to find them online for more than 30 to 35 off, and rightfully so, because this is an absolutely gorgeous watch. They have now expanded their Laureato line to numerous other timepieces in various sizes, various complications, ladies, men's, and so on and so forth. And this is the watch that actually made all those other ones better sellers. I did purchase a bunch of ladies pieces, ceramic, different colored dials, diamond bezels, steel, gold, and so on and so forth. And the reason I did that, in fact, I purchased close to 80 pieces. And the reason I did that is because they sell. Again, I told you guys before, this is a business. I wouldn't buy something if I didn't believe that I could sell it at a profit and inventory wouldn't just sit. Retail price on the steel version is $32,000. The retail price on the PVD version that I showed you here is $38,400, and the rose gold version I believe is $60,100, something of that nature. Moving right along to an Audemars Piguet, surprise, another AP on my episodes, right? But this one is special. And the reason it's special is it kind of takes me back to when I first started to a watch I always coveted and I always wanted, and I wish I bought it at the time because they're so scarce. This is the latest Royal Oak Offshore Perpetual calendar that you're going to find from Audemars Piguet. When I say latest, I'll get into telling you why. Again, not much different from a traditional offshore, and not the newer offshore, not the 45 millimeter or not the 44 millimeter line, but a 42 millimeter line. Although this watch is actually 44 millimeters. They do measure 42 millimeters from here to here, yet there's an extra couple of millimeters on the side. Again, nothing fancy, a traditional perpetual calendar from Audemars Piguet. Not set from the crown. It's set with a pusher, much like many other perpetual calendars out there. There's 1, 2, 3, and 4 spots where you can set the calendar in its various functions. All the functionality of a traditional perpetual, date, month, week, year, leap year indicator, and moon phase. It is a perpetual chronograph, so Patek would deem this to be their grand complication line. Limited edition of 25 pieces. They also what made this watch in titanium. That was limited to 35 pieces, I believe. And again, not many perpetual offshores out there. It all started with the stainless steel perpetual calendar. It sort of looks like the old school offshore. This goes back to when I started in the business. That watch was already out, so it's got to be around 20 years ago. Rumor has it that they only made 25 of this. They're very scarce. That one was not a limited edition. It never said one of 25, much like this one does in the back of the watch. You'll be very hard pressed to find the original perpetual calendar in steel. I know some of my friends in the industry that have them will never sell them because they love that particular watch. And I do believe they've made very, very few of them. And I think 25 was indeed the number. Again, not confirmed, but I'm 99% certain that it was 25. They then followed out with a titanium version of a perpetual calendar offshore with a sort of a funky dial, which to me, I'll be honest with you, was a big flop just because the watch was ugly. And at the time they came out with a titanium version of it, people didn't take very well to titanium. It wasn't part of the norm. Nowadays, everybody makes titanium watches and it's like, okay, great, it's titanium, it's lighter, it's a big bulky watch that I can wear that won't be heavy on my wrist. But back then, people didn't take as well to titanium as they do today. And by making that ugly dial with those baby blue markers, honestly, that was a big flop. You can pick that watch up on the market today in the mid-20s, which is actually still pretty good because back then that watch only retailed for around that $35,000 to $36,000 price mark. I don't remember exactly, so don't quote me. But nevertheless, that watch was a flop. The steel version that I just mentioned, that's definitely a hot watch till this day. And if anybody comes across one, usually they buy it and they keep it and they will never sell it. So you often don't see those out on the market. They traded as high as $75,000 in the mid-2000s, as I remember. What's the fate of this particular watch? It's actually great. The watch retails for $93,000. You'd be hard pressed to find this watch brand new. First of all, so on the secondary market, this watch sells for around that $85,000 to $90,000 price range, pretty much at its retail value due to its scarcity and due to the fact that there's not a lot of offshore perpetuals out there. There's only 3 of them. Most of the time, a consumer that wants to reach for a perpetual calendar will end up with more of a dressier watch, much like the Patek I'm about to show you. There's just not a lot of these big, bulky, heavy perpetuals out there, especially from AP. And this is why this watch keeps its retail value and is a quote-unquote collectible. Again, I tell you guys all the time, watches are not collectibles, they're expensive toys, but this is something that a lot of guys out there, a lot of watch guys out there will deem a collectible just because of how rare this particular watch is. The key difference in the way you can tell it's a perpetual, because once you throw it on your wrist, most people will just think you have an offshore chrono on your wrist. Well, of course, for those that know, but the difference is in the thickness of the case. The perpetual chronograph movement obviously takes up a little bit more real estate, so this watch is very thick on the wrist. Seemingly a normal offshore if you look at it from the top, but if you look at it from the side, it's fairly thick. Matter of fact, we have some offshore in my safe. Let me see. Here's a regular offshore that I happen to have in my safe. This is just a navy. Let me lay them on my desk. So as you can see, the offshore perpetual is slightly thicker than that of an offshore chronograph. Last but not least, let's talk about the granddaddy of them all. Here's another perpetual calendar chronograph that seems to be priced way over the one I just showed you from Audemars Piguet, because Patek Philippe considers their perpetual chronos part of their grand complication collection. And this is not just any 5270. This is a 5270 on the bracelet, which is extremely rare and extremely scarce, as they don't make many of them. So let's talk about the 5270. This is the son of the 5970 perpetual chronograph from Patek Philippe, who in turn was the son of the 3970, the really, really tiny one, right? This is the biggest perpetual chrono that they've made, or the biggest perpetual, I should say, they have made. This is a 41 millimeter case, which is huge for Patek Philippe. Patek Philippe doesn't make big watches. Patek Philippe is known to stay conservative and keep their watches under that 40 millimeter mark. And this is a 41 millimeter case, which again is huge for Patek Philippe. Now, let's talk about the 5270. It was first introduced in 2011, right? 2011, they came out with the white gold version, then they later came out with the platinum version with the salmon dial. And it wasn't until 2015 that they came out with the rose gold version on a strap. Right? And then I believe it was last year they followed up with this watch on a bracelet. If you look at Patek Philippe history and across their models, they always do the same thing. They come out with a particular model, And not that they need to test the market. They're Patek Philippe. Their models sell regardless, you know. But nevertheless, what they do is they'll come out with one medal. And next year they'll come out with another medal. And the following year they'll come out with another medal. Or they'll skip a year and come out with a different dial and so on and so forth. They take the same exact watch and put it in different iterations, therefore creating something new every year to show at Basel. Which if you think about it, like, well, that's nothing crazy. But that's what Patek has been doing for ages. They've been successful at it. It's a formula that works for them. And if it works, why fix it? Seemingly the same exact watch. It's the same exact movement. One thing to note, it's got a brand new in-house chronograph movement that sits inside this watch. But again, this is nothing different than from the original 5270 that came out in 2011. And yet you got to take your hat off to Patek to say, oh, wait, it's 2019. The first 5270 was introduced almost 10 years ago, and yet these things are selling like hotcakes. This watch retails for $200,000. $198,300, I believe, is their official retail. Guess what this watch sells for on the secondary market? This watch is actually sold to a dealer for $160,000. Why do you ask? Good luck finding one of these. And that's just the bottom line. Bracelet models, they make in such low numbers, almost as to do it on purpose to make them that much more desirable and that much more collectible, much like the 5711 Nautiluses and so on and so forth. Supply and demand. The less of them they're made, the more they're deemed collectible by the general public, the more they're deemed scarce by dealers like myself, and therefore we pay more money for them because getting one of these timepieces is next to impossible. If somebody asked me today, Roman, well, this watch being so scarce, and you know, it's got to be a collectible, I should go out there and pick that up, I will tell you the same thing. These watches are not collectibles, they're expensive toys, but because they made so very few of them, and if you're out there looking to spend $250,000 on the watch that will most likely hold its value through time, certainly get out and pick one of these up. But the main reason I would tell you to pick one of these up is because I am not a big fan of the 5970 on the strap in terms of its overall looks. But the minute they threw this watch on a bracelet, honestly, I love it. I love the way it looks. I love the bracelet. And again, I told you before, I'm a sucker for gimmicks. No, they don't make that very many of them. I would certainly be a guy that would want to own one of these timepieces. Last but not least, I want to talk about the whole extra back thing, right? Oftentimes, these complicated watches, 5270, 5970s, this particular watch, they come with an extra back. And I brought that here to show you. All it is a solid back for the watch, which carries all the numbers in the back, all the serial numbers that matches to the watch, so it's not generic. And a lot of times guys tend to lose these things. Why do they lose these things? Let's look at the back of the watch. Why would you want to cover this up? Like seriously, the exhibition back clearly shows you the beauty of the movement, the beauty of this complicated machine. Why would anybody want to take and cover this up? In fact, I don't know a single client that has bought a Patek from me that carries an extra back that has put the extra back on. Because to me, why would you do that? When I take that watch off, I want to admire the back. So what ends up happening is this thing ends up sitting in a box, in a desk somewhere. It never gets put on, and oftentimes it gets lost. I almost wish Patek didn't do this, because the minute you lose this extra back from this particular watch, it devalues the watch greatly. Because the watch is now not complete. It's missing this extra piece of gold, this extra back that is never ever used. So that's sort of a pet peeve of mine. I actually wish Patek did not include these things with these watches, because oftentimes they get misplaced, they get lost. I once lost an extra back to a 5970 and ended up losing like 10 grand on the watch because I lost the extra back. It got misplaced somewhere in shipment. I don't know, most likely got thrown out with the box that it was shipped in, and so on and so forth. So honestly, really unnecessary Patek Philippe. Really no need for this extra back, even in my opinion. But if you do guys buy this watch, take that extra back, because I know you won't put it on your watch because you're not going to want to cover that up. Take that extra back, put it in the safety deposit box and wear it away in the safe, and kind of forget about it to ensure that it doesn't get lost. Don't keep it in the box of the watch. Oftentimes boxes get mixed up. Stick it inside that folder that the papers come in, and tape it to it. Do something of that nature along with the pusher, and make sure you guys don't lose this, because it just devalues the watch, which is kind of stupid. Again, I wish Patek didn't make these extra backs for these watches. Either case, guys, I'm still wearing my original Brigade Type 20, which I showed you on the last episode. As I said, I haven't taken this watch for a while. It's sort of like that new toy, and when I get a new toy, I tend to wear it a lot. If you enjoyed this episode, as usual, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. If you're not subscribed to my channel, share this with your friends across social media for those that you feel will enjoy the content that I put out on a weekly basis. And I'll see you guys next week for more watch reviews and other videos.